I'm Paula Roy. On behalf of the Wellington West BIA, I'm delighted to welcome you to another Taste of Wellington West virtual program. The last few months have really impacted the way many of us think about food. Some of us have altered our shopping patterns. Some people are preparing more meals at home than ever before. Some people are preparing more elaborate meals. And we've seen a rise in home vegetable gardens, which impacts what gets to our table. And then of course there's a matter of what to do with all that produce. So there's been a resurgence in canning and pickling and preserving. I, for one, am really excited to see that happening because I grew up making big batches of pickles with my mom to feed our large family, and it was something that I really enjoyed. But today you don't have to do the big batch thing, and we're going to talk about quick pickles instead. I've got 3 great recipes that show you how easy it is to make just 1 jar of a favorite pickle, tuck it in the fridge, no fuss, no muss, no hot water bath processing, enjoy it within the month, and then make another jar. So I'll start with the first and easiest recipe for you, and this is a pickled cucumber with dill and coriander. So I've got some cucumber slices in my jar already, and I'm going to add some sprigs of fresh dill. And if you can't find fresh dill, you could use dried dill if you prefer. And I'm going to add some thinly sliced shallot. You could use red onion if you like. It's nice to have something with a bit of a purpley hue for some contrast in the jar. I'm going to top it up with more cucumber. And the idea of layering is just so that the flavors can percolate through the pickles a little bit more quickly, since they're not sitting on the shelf for a long time. And the last of the dill. And my jar is ready. So now I've made a brine of a combination of cider and rice vinegar, water, salt, sugar, some crushed coriander seeds, and that's it. And in this case, we've allowed the brine to cool to a bit cooler than lukewarm. And the reason for that is we don't want to cook these cucumbers. We want them to stay nice and crisp and green, so we're not putting a hot brine on them, which would cook them. So we pour in our brine, and I'm going to scoop out those few little coriander seeds. I harvested coriander seeds from my cilantro plants in my garden, and you could do the same if you have some on hand. And we just put a lid on it, and this one is ready to go straight into the fridge because it's not hot. So that's it. That's how easy it is to make 1 jar of cucumbers. So up for our next event, we're going to do some pickled grilled corn, and that might be something that you haven't thought about before, but it's super delicious. And one of the things I love about this pickle is that it can be part of a great vegetarian meal. I often mix the pickled corn with a can of black beans that have been rinsed and drizzled with a bit of olive oil, and then a few splashes of the pickling brine from the jar, and it's a delicious salad. So we have a brine here that we've been keeping warm on our induction burner, because in this case we do want to kind of soften the corn a little bit. And this is about 1 ear's worth of corn. I husked it, drizzled it with a tiny bit of olive oil, and I grilled it on the barbecue for about 7 minutes until it was just beginning to char and the kernels were nice and soft when I poked them with a knife. So I'm going to transfer the corn into the canning jar, and you'll notice that this jar is not what would be considered an old school canning jar. It's actually an old jam jar from the store, and that's a great thing about quick pickles. You don't need to buy special jars because they don't have to be sealed tight, because they're not going to be sitting on a shelf for months and months and months. So any jar that will just have a lid that sits nicely on it, that's all you need. So in goes the corn into this jar. And the same, we're going to layer the flavors, so I'll put in about half of the corn, and then I'm going to add some more sliced shallot. You could again use red onion if you like. And I've got some fresh cilantro leaves here. So it's got a bit of a sort of southwestern thing going on, which is why it is such a great fit with black beans. And the rest of the corn into the jar. You can see how quick this process really is. It only takes minutes. So people used to be put off by the thought of a day-long production doing traditional large batch canning, and this is just the absolute opposite of that. Last of the onions into the jar, and I've got garlic, and then I'm going to tuck down the sides of the jar some strips of hot pepper. I like this red long hot pepper, and I'm just cutting from the edge of the pepper. You can see this, and leaving the seeds behind. So it's not going to be too hot. And I'm making the pieces big enough so that when people go to eat the pickles, if they don't prefer the hot pepper, they can easily find them and take them out. And that should apply to any element you put in a jar of pickles beyond the main ingredient. So same with the onions, you'll notice that they were generously sized so that people could work around them if they needed to. And the reason for tucking these down the sides is that it just makes the jars look so much prettier. And that's a great point because you might choose to make more than one jar at a time. They're super duper gifts if you wanted to offer something to a neighbor or a friend. So if you make a couple of jars, you can keep one and share the others. So now our jar is all set, and we're going to pour this warm brine, warm but not scalding hot, over the corn. And I can see that it doesn't quite reach the top of the jar. So here's an important tip. You can always top up a quick pickle with just a tablespoon or so of water as needed. It's not going to affect the flavor any, and it's not going to throw the proportions out of whack. So on goes our lid, and our quick pickled grilled corn is ready. In this case, I'm going to let the jar sit until it's at room temperature, and then I'm going to tuck it in the fridge. So on to our third recipe, and this is one of my absolute favorites. And the reason is that it's a bit unusual and people just seem to go nuts for it whenever I serve it up. It's a cauliflower pickle, a curried cauliflower pickle. So I've got little cauliflower florets in my jar. They're really small, probably about less than an inch in size. And I got this cauliflower at the Parkdale Market. I have to say, I find it so inspiring there these days. There's so much great produce still available, and they've had, after a rough start to the season, they've had an excellent August and September for growing, so I'm really happy for them. And in my frying pan here, I've got a mixture of seasonings. I started off by toasting some cumin and coriander seeds, and then I added in some curry powder and some turmeric, and I let that toast a bit, and then I added in ginger and garlic slices, and those have been lightly toasted too. So we're going to turn our burner on to medium heat, and now we're going to add some rice vinegar. I don't generally use a lot of white vinegar for my pickles. I find that it's just a bit bland in flavor, so I tend to favor rice or cider vinegar instead. And a teaspoon of sugar, and a half a teaspoon of coarse salt, and a third of a cup of water. With quick pickles, generally, you've always got a combination of acid and water, and that's because the flavor will be too strong if you use all acid. So I'm just going to let this come to a boil really quickly, and then I'm going to pour it over my cauliflower. So this pickle ends up with a really great, vibrant, yellowy hue thanks to the turmeric and the curry powder. And while I love to eat them just as is, they're also great scattered on top of a salad. I even chop them up a little bit more finely and put them in rice along with some raisins or chopped dates, and it makes a really, really simple but delicious rice dish. And people are always surprised by the color of it when they sort of think yellow cauliflower, and then I explain that it's been pickled, and they really, really like it. So my mixture is just about boiling, and in this case, because the cauliflower is raw, we do want to put a boiling mixture on it so that it kind of cooks the cauliflower as it cools down, and that softens it, so you don't lose all of the crunch, but it makes it just a little bit easier to eat than a raw cauliflower. All right, I don't know if you can see the steam, but it's happening, so we're going to turn it off. And now we're going to pour it over our cauliflower, and we want to make sure that the spices get in there too. So I'll give them a hand if need be. There we go. Our jar is nice and full, and I will grab the last 2 bits of ginger and tuck them in. And once again, because this is warm, we're going to let it sit at room temperature and cool off before it goes into the fridge. So that took less than 10 minutes to make 3 jars of pickles with very little prep time, and I'm just so excited for these flavors. I think I'm going to have grilled cheese for lunch tomorrow with these ones because they're ready in a day. The corn similarly will be ready tomorrow, and I might end up tossing that on top of some tacos. It's got so many uses. And the curried cauliflower pickles, they take about 4 or 5 days to get to their peak of flavor, so I'm going to have to be patient and wait for those. I hope you give quick pickling a try this season, and if you do, please post a picture of your colorful jars and tag it with the hashtag Taste of Wellington West, and you'll automatically be entered during the festival, which runs September 14th to October 10th, to win a gift card from one of our area merchants. Happy pickling!